you and I know an organization that's built its entire business on purpose by really working with, laborers who are mistreated, not given dignity, all of that. But it's an organization that has a maximum amount of attrition, 50, 60%, all saying, we just don't see the value in working in this organization. So it's purpose-driving business at a global level, but unable to translate that into building an institution where people feel that purpose. Yeah. So I really want to ask this question to everyone, how do we really unpack all of this if we really want to build an organization that can outlive our lives? Right?
I can pick up an example of what I experimented with. As I said earlier, I picked up all these people from the community and I trained them to run this organization. And they all started like some assistant staff and then moved into becoming managers or whatever. Then I have this big understanding, now this purpose of this organization has been inculcated into them. Now the people from the community should take this organization forward. This is all my imagination of how I want to build this institution. But there was a moment where I saw one exodus of all these people leaving the organization because there was something, the other NGO, whichever was paying them more, one guy went and he took everybody. Despite the contract we made with the other founder, look, don't poach people from here. But anyway, it happened. Now I was like, I stood there with, what is the purpose? That's the question, that moment. The trust got mistrusted, my entire trust got broken, shaken, because the people who I thought are going to go along in building this organization is suddenly leaving for some carrot outside. And for me, then the question is like, what do I do? I was really in the crossroads at that moment. For me, I think then I got in touch with that purpose. My purpose is not to rely the temporariness of who wants to stabilize this. My purpose is to ensure that how this purpose can move forward with newer energies, newer people, and bring different strengths into the system. And not to get stuck with only these can make it happen. So as long as you're open as a leader to try and take risk and experiment it and believe that there are many other who can make it happen. The left behinds were very, average, they were not yet there. But still having faith and trusting them that you can do it and be with them to lift them up is one way to rebuild the trust back in the purpose.
Yeah. And Vivek, if I build on that. See, I think what is really required is a reframing of what organizations really stand for. Exactly. I think we are all probably, I'm making an assumption, we are stuck in the economic model of an organization today, right? However, the world has moved. Today, let's look at it this way. A lot of institutions around us, right, whether it is religious institutions, family, etc., they're failing or they're no longer there. So the reframing, posits us to really look at organizations also as social entities which satisfy certain social needs. And my hypothesis is that somewhere we are missing the plot there. If we look at organizations as socio-economic entities where people come to satisfy some of their social needs, and as a byproduct maybe some of the economic needs of the organization also get served, or they can coexist. If we ever to reframe organizations from this perspective, probably some of the answers we will get.
But that is not how now people are looking at. So the way in which you were also saying, there's so much of FOMO, especially in the startup tech world. Exactly. Organizations are also now using it for economic activities. So there are a lot of ed tech startups who basically recruited at crazy salaries. Many teachers basically from small towns left their good stable jobs to join these companies at triple the salaries, and then quickly it was decided that no, now I no longer need you. And even for CEOs, for example, in many I-banks, European I-banks, US I-banks, the tenure of the CEO itself is basically 2 years, 3 years. So I'm pleasantly surprised that a CEO could basically pour his heart out, because in his heart he's thinking about his million of ESOP and his million of salary, and he's happy to fire people quickly so that he can achieve his yearly bonus.
This person is 35 years in the bank.
Okay, yeah. So,
Slightly
but
different.
I'm saying more and more he's becoming a rarity, because even while the CEO is talking emotionally, he's also faking that emotion. In his mind, he's thinking about the economic benefit that he can quickly get by holding these people to do something. So now it is becoming economic from both sides.
I'll link it back to the question which Vivek had asked, right? I think today again, and don't mistake me, ma'am, our education system, especially engineering, MBAs, etc. How is it that the institutes are positioning themselves? This is this package.
CTC, highest CTC achieved.
That is how they're adopting.
Day zero, day zero.
Honestly, don't mistake me. I completely agree. In the paper, I work in school
Even the
education.
education institutes are giving day zero to the highest salary,
Yeah.
not to the day zero based
So,
on
which
job.
brings me to the question which I've always asked is, what is success? If I say you are successful and I am successful, we can't, if CTC cannot be the indicator of success. And so I read this article which said that there are 4 elements of enduring success. And I think that's applicable to an individual as well as to organizations. So sometimes I take a column of personal and professional and try to fill it up. So the 4 elements of success are achievement, significance, joy, and legacy. One of the new career anchors is lifestyle. So career anchors that we grew up with were either I want to be an expert, or I want to be a general manager, or I want to be an entrepreneur, challenge, or I want security. But one of the ones, the noisiest, so in a B school, I'll ask, especially people with experience, ask them to do the test, and which is the biggest career anchor, and the noisiest one is lifestyle. For me, lifestyle is more important. So the question I want to ask is, if we look at the West and we look at the East, I know West and East is a large grouping. What are they 25 years from now? What will happen to their institutions? Or all institutions actually began as religious institutions, which then funded educational institutions, which then got groups of people together. So that's how it all started. So if you look at the West and the East, in 24 years from now, where will Bharat be with this kind of negotiation? So my question is that 25 years from now, when we are at 2047 and 100 years post-independence, would we have met our potential? What will come in the way, and what makes you hopeful?
One of the biggest aspects of life in India is the family, right? And the next generation is beginning to realize it, and they are not very fixated about their identity, right? This little spike that we are looking at, I've heard a few of my colleagues being a little not so generous and calling it mercenary and so on in terms of workforce preferences and so on. I think it's a passing phase. See, finally, if businesses need to become sustainable, they need to be able to produce products at a price where people buy it and they're profitable, right? Not to be discouraging, but I think especially tech salaries, the more that tech salaries are going back to the levels that the switch companies, as they were called, now the SS become T, right? Twitch companies, right? Tech Mahindra. So I think once that happens, I think the overall market kind of stabilizes, and it's actually going to lead to a lot more economic prosperity and inclusion, right? Because there's more money available to pay salaries, to create products that are sustainable, enduring, and so on, right? I think one real good lever that all of us have to work with our own constituencies of employees is the family, right? And I think that's one thing that we are kind of letting go of sometimes, and that's also something that's going to help us reach that shining Bharat or whatever it is.
India also has young workforce, tech-savvy workforce, very, very diverse set of people, right? Like within our own country. So I think all of these are going to be really, really positive contributions. And what Dr. Sid said, which is, I think, a temporary glitch, a spike in the stock market, a spike in the job market, whatever, it will settle down. We are seeing it in the job market as well. It will settle down, and I think India is very, very well poised. The one thing that we are not great at is, I can't remember who said it, which is around our implementation or our execution. That is the one thing that I think we really need to improve. We have good vision, we have intent and everything, but sometimes the short-term short-term gains, cloud our judgments.
So I have a slightly differing view. So as an entrepreneur, I basically feel that Bharat at 100, which is 23 years more. So by that time, so now if you look around, if you look at the stock market, you look at the companies that are coming for IPO. These are small entrepreneurs from which are some factory in Gujarat, some guy who is basically has trucks which are collecting garbage from the municipality. That company is also listed now.
Yeah.
So entrepreneurs across the country are basically swept in this way where they have much more liberty. The market is looking at China +1. Other countries, including China, are basically their young population is basically slowing down. So India remains to be one of those countries in the next 20-23 years which is going to do really well. So I am extremely optimistic that even in terms of execution, I think you look at things around you, slowly everything is changing. We would have never have imagined that COVID, everything will be on app. Today when you go to airport, Digi Yatra, and today if you go to US, you will discover that our financial institutions are far better than US. You don't have UPI there, you can't transfer money instantly. So as years are passing by, but the thing which will change perhaps in workforce is that if you look back 25 years, before looking 25 years ahead, the age of the organization is shrinking. So earlier the organizations like Amul basically have this 20, 30, 40, 50 year horizon. Now Google was not there 15 years back. Our lives don't work without Google, but 15 years back Google was not there. I opened my Gmail account 2007 or something. So organization tenure, longevity will shrink. The people who are working for, I think when you talk about West versus East, so the thing which will happen, which will copy from West is perhaps employees thinking much more about themselves. But a good part is that many of the bad things which were there in the Indian so-called promoter culture. I remember basically talking to a promoter we were standing on say second floor, and he said that there was a time when if I would have asked any of my employee to jump from here, they would have jumped.
With pride he said that.
With pride he said, अब नहीं है यार ऐसा, अब नहीं मिलते ऐसे लोग.
Yeah.
So I am saying that sort of culture is surely going to basically go away, where you think that you are the karta dharta, you are the andata, and everybody is working for you. People are now much more mature, much more demanding. That bad thing will go away. But I hope that many of the good things which Asians have, which Indians have, which is about more emotions, more family, they will continue. For example, the companies that I have worked earlier and I have had amazing bosses, now when I meet them, I basically don't shake hands, I touch their feet and they say no first time, but then they understand the emotion, because then I said, now there's no formality, why should I shake your hand when my feeling is not that? When my feeling is to basically touch your feet, I want to touch your feet. So I hope that 20-25 years from now, surely as organizations will be much leaner, much meaner, they will be much competitive. So those
Cleaner also, I hope.
those capitalistic things will surely be there, because we will go US way. But hopefully we will be able to retain the good things that as Asian country we have, and as employers we have, as employees we have.
Just to add to what you said.
Everybody. I think
Great energy.
Yeah, Maya. And,
Mine is a bit more pessimistic and a skeptical
Okay,
view.
so
I also will add to
maybe
that.
also, which is why I just want us to step back, because we have to look at the children, and because they are the human capitals. And we're talking about, I think, Balaji was talking about having a more social building social capacity and apart from economic. I think we have to look at the human capital, because why are we really nurturing the human capital of our country while we're talking about India shining in Viksit Bharat, etc. The point is that are we really nurturing them, and that nurturing happens only in schools. Or should happen. It will happen, of course, in the homes, but a lot of our homes, I know Sid is very positive about the family being the stabilizing factor, the anchoring factor, but a lot of time families are not. If you look at the large segment of Indian population, families are disintegrating in many ways. So we need to be aware of that, whether it's urban or rural. families are not necessarily as stable entities as they used to be. So we have to look at how do we build human capital of our youth in a way that they can sort of navigate through these stormy waters while trying to thrive and flourish. And I think we as a country focus so much on the high flyers and on the star performers.
Yes.
We don't
Yes.
focus on the average. I want to remind, somebody very wise told me once that the success of any great nation or civilization depends on the excellence of its average,
Beautifully
not on
said.
the brilliance of the few.
Beautifully
And I think
said.
that's something we forget.
Yeah.
And we have to, it's the average person who builds our roads, our bridges, handles the railway systems, etc. And if we don't nurture them, it doesn't matter how many startups and how many great organizations that we have.
Do you also think that sports has a lot of contribution, because we didn't talk about
Absolutely.
sports?
Of course.
Absolutely, I'm
Because
coming to
especially
that.
the team sports.
No, I'm
art,
coming to that
culture.
to say. One is that if this country goes more tech in a very positive way, and if it becomes corruption free, then I think we will definitely be the largest GDP in the world, and much more quickly than anybody else is predicting, because I think 70% of the population is saying they want to do things. The reality is today 8 to 10% of the people are in the private sector. That's all there is to it. Unorganized sector put together also it's about 20-30% maximum. So majority of them are in the agriculture sector, and we did work for one of the largest Indian groups, and people in a very remote village didn't want to work in the farm because they could wear a pant and go to a BPO. Wearing a pant was such a big thing for some of these people. Yeah, and not going with a dhoti and going and working in the farm. I completely agree with you. I think the way, even irrespective of which government it is, there are a lot of things which are also happening positively. The quality of offices have changed. The way people are working are changing to an extent. Youngsters are changing, and you said sports is going to make a difference. My niece runs an NGO wherein I was asking her the other day, you should do all this if you have to really become big. And so she said, why should I become big?
Wow, what a question.
Then she said, why should I become successful? What is success? She said, people in the US, the Native Americans, are thinking about 7 generations ahead, how they have to live, and they are living their lives now. And but unfortunately, that's a small population, and the rest of the world,
It's a
we think
minuscule
we own the whole
population.
thing and we want to transform. So sometimes very deeper levels of thinking needs to even get into the corporate level, even for people like us, so that we do reverse coach. It's very important to understand from youngsters and learn from them. But all said and done, whatever you may call it as success, the growth of this country, unless something drastically goes wrong, is so poised well because of the population, which was a bane, now it has become a boon. And the way people are looking at it, I think there's such a tremendous way we can make a difference, because some of the countries, without naming them, are not democratic. So here there are people with all its problems, they can still voice out to an extent. He talked about somebody challenging the teachers, right? And so I read a story wherein 2 students, they get over 95%, and so the teacher is calling them and congratulating them, and one of them thinks he's very smart, and he says, but when you're just 4 years older to us, you're teaching in our school, so what marks did you get?
Oh my God.
And they have to mark it themselves. So he says, I got 45%. So he said, you are teaching me, and I got a 95%. And so, he felt bad, and then they said, tomorrow we want to give you a test to see.
Children said.
That both the children who got 95%, we will give you a test, and we want to see how you fare. So next day, they come in and they ask him, they have a sparrow in their hand, and they're holding the sparrow. And so they're asking, the sparrow in my hand is dead or alive? And he's thinking about it, and he's saying, it is in your hands. So wisdom,
it is in your hands.
Wisdom, yeah.
and values and trust and stuff like that, you can't replace. And I feel the more we kind of educate our people into how people earlier lived in this country, and even if there are some bad things, we should say why they should not repeat that.
Exactly.
What contributed? We don't need to hide what is bad. I think many people have this thing
tend to
of
brush
only
it under
talking
the
about
carpet.
saying India is
Yeah.
a great country with great values.
talk about
With
everything.
Vedas, Upanishads, even at that time you had problems.
Yeah.
So we need to understand that there are always good and bad people, there are good and bad things. But if you are able to say why we are doing this and why we should become, if for want of a better word, the superpower in the real sense and add meaning to our lives, I think that will be starting at the school level.
But I want to look at, I've had these observations over the last 3 years because I've been working a lot in the impact sector as well, and a lot in the education space, especially with Maya and stuff. And I feel, there is the emergence of what I feel is India and Bharat, clearly, with two different mindsets that's evolving. And that's going to be probably the biggest thing we will have to sort of deal with. One is the privileged, or sort of everybody
Westernized, privileged.
westernized, privileged, who are now sort of saying, I want to have empathy, I want to be more compassionate, it's all about sustainability, everything. Whereas the emerging India, right, which is everyone we have worked with to sort of now have access agency, saying lifestyle, as you rightly said, hugely important. Aspirations, can I be also at this table? Hugely driving them. All of this is renegotiating what is good and bad. Why are we seeing so many Jantaras sort of happening in this country today? Because no longer am I worried whether I'm making money with a right set of means or wrong set of means, as long as my lifestyle is being met. And that's becoming a dominant voice for whatever reason it may be, political, social changes, all of that. And it's all about short term, right now and here. And that's going to define a lot of what is going to be the larger growth population, I think, for the next 25 years. And the other big concern that I personally have is, where are women in all of this?
Exactly.
Right? Because I think, statistics say even if STEM is the biggest job creator that's going to be here, women are less than 10, 12% in STEM. What does it all mean for us? Right? I think these are going to be the bigger challenges of what institutions will have to face. But today's problems of purpose and stuff, I feel, are just today's problems. But this is what's going to come in. Like I was talking about, we did a research for about 4,500 kids, and everyone said, "मुझे पैसे बनाना है." आप career के बारे में क्या बात कर रहे हैं?
See, that indicates how the statement has been made, India should become 5 trillion.
Exactly.
So the whole thing is driven towards that, right? So we are not looking at the inequality that exists at every level, and we are not paying attention to any of those things, and we are brushing it aside, and everybody has gotten in the rat race of really now looking at, okay, 5 trillion, India will shine. But I don't know if that's the India Bharat we want to see in 2047. Can we see a world of the coexistence of everybody with diverse culture that we are very proud of as a country? I think that is the biggest difference between the East, West and India.
Yeah.
You know, the diverse
We were
culture.
naturally multicultural
Exactly,
and
and
diverse.
so
Tolerant,
beautiful it is.
inclusive, all
Within
of
South
that.
India, you look at it, 10,000 different dishes we prepare. Yeah, everybody says this sambar has to be made this way, that way, whatever. You can't figure it out but there's so much of diversity, and it's so beautiful. The way we dress, the way we eat food, the way we speak language. I think no other country has this rich heritage of what Bharat has. How are we, my fear is, are we losing this in the process of the money power that we are all aiming for at all levels? Like, even picking up from what you're saying, everybody is now wanting to dream how much money I can make. Every organization is dreaming how many workforce I can bring, and so therefore the investors can get more profit, and how is the NSE is becoming rising points for the stakeholders. That is what we want? Are we losing our humanness in the whole mamla of how we want to grow as a nation? That's worrying, very worrying.
I think
And
this
that's why the
increasing-
word institution, because an institution is not about profit alone. It is about purpose and what it stands for.
Exactly.
And I'll quote something slightly controversial. I won't mention the name of the company, but there's this organization that is very successful financially, and we were with a group of bankers on their annual offsite, and they were of course customers to the organization was a big borrower, and we were talking about values, and there were 40 bankers in the room, and when we mentioned this name, it's a very big name, everyone just laughed, and then I looked back and said, what is institution? You may be financially very strong, but what do people have to say about you, and does it not go together? So, and therefore achieving an end outcome which is not supported by solid pillars of what anchors us together can become a very, very dangerous. I think I'm very optimistic. I think we are going to do great stuff, but what is great? And one way to do that, I loved your point about the marginalized and the average, and I think 5th standard, 6th standard is when your mind really opens up. Looking at what are 5th standard and 6th standard children talking about gives you a good indication of what they are going to do when they go there. I went to a very ordinary school, okay, it was a government aided school. Our teachers earned practically nothing. But even today, I will recount stories of that teacher who barely made any money, who made such a difference to my life and, you know, did that.
Economically, we will be great. But there is no social institution, institution building is completely lacking in us.
Absolutely.
And there's, see, all of that growth will have to have certain guardrails which governs and regulates it. That has collapsed. And it's a social phenomenon. I mean, like most of the, you know, if you look at core sociology or even, let's say, the Marxian view, you will have a thesis and an antithesis, and somewhere you will synthesize. We will have to go through it. But can we now start building those institutions? What our ancient wisdom also has taught us, I think somewhere we're forgetting that and we're burying it. To the career anchors that you mentioned, Sujata, I think one career anchor is something that we can learn from the Purushartha model, where dharma, your achievement and lifestyle, these are all things. But what is it that the East and especially India has given as one of the primary drivers or motivations? I mean, if you go away from the McClellan model, is dharma. You spoke about the Taj, right?
Yeah.
When the Taj incident happened, I mean, this is my own interpretation. Why did people stay there, put there up and did everything they did? Because of dharma.
It's the right thing to do.
That's the right thing to do. Right? Now, unless we really understand this, and we start appreciating that this is what we have contributed.
It's not the individual that you're building, but what that individual contributes back, which builds something beautiful.
So I would think the relationship and the confidence in the self, which is built in early years, not looking at my peer getting 20 lakhs more than me and saying, "Arey, I am from this college," holding on to that. And therefore, when I am strong with my relationship with myself, then my relationship with my organization or institution is there. They say that your relationship with the world is a reflection of the relationship you have with yourself. And if I'm constantly moving from place to maximize things, it's telling me a lot about your relationship with yourself and that of the institution.
That goes down to say that how much I can trust myself, how can I believe in myself, and how I don't have to be always comparing myself with the other, therefore I feel either discounted or feel good about. I think that is the mindset which has seeped in, which is sort of destroying this whole thing. I think one of the things which we can take from the other country culture is our attitude.
It comes from I talk about, said about empathy. I think empathy, compassion are really vital for building institutions and nations.
All levels of attitude, the approach we take, the kind of behavior we're exhibiting, the kind of, not giving, enough respect and dignity to the others, and the stereotypes and assumptions we are making, and based on that we are making so many decisions. Everything rolls into the attitude. So how do we really build that core value of an attitude of individuals which amounts to institutions? Even institutions have to ultimately, how the attitude of the institution really exhibits itself for its success is the key, right? So I think we might have enough knowledge, we might have done enough research, we might really own a lot of skills, but at the end of the day, if our attitude is not in the right place, no institutions can work, either a marriage institution or it's an organization institution or an education institution. So I think that's the key, I feel, and something can be done about it.
Yes.
Thank you for inviting us. It was a very wonderful conversation. coming from the tech sector, this is a very different kind of conversation than I usually have. So it is quite refreshing, and also talking about Bharat in 23 years or Bharat in 2047 is actually quite good. Obviously, East meets West, and how do we make sure that we take the good things of the West, but not at the expense of losing some of our individual things that stand out is actually quite good. Thank you for having us, and
Maya, you get to say the last word.
Just to go back to your question, Bharat at 2047. I'm not sure if I'm going to be alive at 2047, but
We will be there to see it.
We'll see to it that
We'll see to it. Wow.
my organization is nearly 22 years old, and this is 23 years into the future. And I think when we are looking into the future, I hope we will also look at what in the past we have done, which has brought us glory, success, achievement, while we look into the future. I love this quote by Neil Postman, which says, "Children are the living messages that we send to a future we will not see." And I think if we can keep that in mind, I think the whole idea of attitude, the idea of empathy, the idea of building human capacity, human capability, potential, all of that will be solid if we think about children as messages that we send to a future which is much beyond our time.
Beautifully said. Very well said. Very well. So we come to I mean, this is what is that? This is not the beginning of the end, but the end of the beginning. What I'm taking away from this conversation is that we cannot lose touch with our basics. There is a lot of latent learning and wisdom that we have. We also have the diversity and the scale and the know-how and the technology to get there. We have to craft our own path. And along the way, not forget the children, the average, the people in the fringe, because it's very easy for us to come and have this conversation. We are 0.1% of the population. But for the farmer who is dreaming of sending his son or daughter wearing pants to work versus, being on the field, we must understand what they are going through. And until the last person gets there, we are not really there. So I'm very, very grateful and thankful to all of you for being here. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.